Sudanese novel History and Development الطيب صالح 1929-2009 The Doum Tree of Hamid Part 2. I'm so pleased to meet you once again, the audience, with the Doum Tree of Hamid in our second part, where the contours of violence emerge in the attempt to impose the agricultural project by force. The narrator recounts with evident sorrow that this attempt was not the act of colonial authority, but of the national government that succeeded it. Through this episode, the narrative reveals a persistent dilemma in the relationship between center and periphery. Marginal regions appear absent from the conscience of political leadership, except at critical moments when their voices are needed, only to be swiftly forgotten as power returns to the center, neglecting their rights and claims. Through the narrator's voice, the text ultimately affirms the primacy of dialogue as the most viable path, emphasizing that peaceful coexistence is possible, and that the land is vast enough for the agricultural project, for the harbor, for the Doum tree, just as it is for the shrine. طيب صالح concludes with a subtle and evocative gesture toward the possibility of balance between a heritage-laden past with its religious and popular beliefs and the imperatives of modernization and change. To delve more deeply into this second part of our documentary series on the history of the Sudanese novel, I'm delighted to welcome you to our second encounter with the Doum Tree of Hamid. So the audience, as you follow and as you listen, we are in our second encounter with the طيب صالح short story, The Doum Tree of Hamid. And in this regard, I would like to state again that what is behind the thematic meaning, the central idea that طيب صالح tries to discuss in this short story is the speech on the notion of traditionalism versus modernism. And we have taken the speech on Hamid at the village, at the sacred place, through which طيب صالح tries to express the conflict between modernity and traditionalism. So one of the issues that have participated and contributed magnificently on the plot inside the story itself is that political issue. For طيب صالح has stated that politics was present in that issue. And here we try to experience with him the political side inside the story, and he stated that the first attempt of trying to eradicate the sacred place, which stands as an identity, as history, as culture for the local, in place of building or constructing agriculture project. First attempt has been carried out by the British rule, but it failed. And the second one has been attempted during the national rule. Moreover, it had failed. But unfortunately, violence have been committed against both the locals and the government agents. Through the narrative's voice, the text ultimately affirms the primacy of dialogue as the most viable path, emphasizing that peaceful coexistence is possible and that the land is vast enough for the agriculture project, for the harbor, for the dormitory, just as it is for the shrine. Tayyip Saleh concludes with a subtle and evocative gesture toward the possibility of balance between heritage-laden past with its religious and popular beliefs and the imperative of modernization and change. To delve more deeply into this sacred part of our documentary series on the history of the Sudanese novel, I'm delighted to welcome you to our second encounter with the Doum tree of Hamid. However, dear audience, what I would like to do in this episode, as you listen, introducing the theme or the main idea behind the episode, that I would like to share the original texts, more specifically on the area of the government attempts to re-establish or to establish an agricultural project, harbor for the ships and steamers at the very same place of the dormitory and the shrine of Hamid. So here I would like to share the words of the writer. And the words of the writer here, it has been narrated through the tongue of the grandfather, who in fact is the major character at the very same time. Listen. Once the government, wanting to put through an agriculture scheme, decided to cut it down. They said that the best place for setting up the bomb was where the Doum tree stood. As you can see, the people of our village are concerned solely with their everyday needs, and I cannot remember their ever having rebelled against anything. So here, sharing the original text of the writer, narrating a retelling by the grandfather to the younger boy while the latter is listening to him. To continue, however, when they heard about cutting down the Doum tree, they all rose up as one man and barred the district commissioner's way. That was in the time of the foreign rule. The flies assisted them too, the horse flies. The man was surrounded by the clamoring people, shouting if the Doum tree were cut down, they would fight the government to the last man. While the flies played havoc with the man's face. As his papers were scattered in the water, we heard him cry out, "All right, Doum tree stay, scheme no stay." And so neither the bomb nor the scheme came about, and we kept our Doum tree. first attempt, as I told, the first attempt of establishing agricultural scheme and the harbor for the steamer and ships were at the very same place of the Doum tree and with Hamid shrine. So the first attempt was during the foreign rule, as he expressed it, during the British rule. To the second attempt, listen to the grandfather telling the young boy. At the beginning of Home Rule, a civil servant came to inform us that the government was intending to set up a stopping place for the steamer. He told us that the national government wished to help us and to see us progress. And his face was radiant with enthusiasm as he talked. But he could see that the faces around him expressed no reaction. My son, we are not people who travel very much. And when we wish to do so for some important matter, such as registering land or seeking the advice about a matter of divorce, we take a morning's ride on our donkeys and then board the steamer from the neighboring village. My son, we have grown accustomed to this. In fact, it is precisely for this reason that we breed donkeys. It is little wonder, the speech is still for the grandfather. It is little wonder then that the government official could see nothing in the people's faces to indicate that they were pleased with the news. His enthusiasm waned, and being at his wits' end, he began to fumble for words. Where will the stopping place be? Someone asked him after a period of silence. The official replied that there was only one suitable place, where the Doum tree stood. Had you that instant brought along a woman and had her stand among those men as naked as the day her mother bore her, they could not have been more astonished. The steamer usually passes here on a Wednesday. One of the men quickly replied, if you made a stopping place, then it would be here on Wednesday afternoon. So official replied that the time fixed for the steamer to stop by their village would be 4 o'clock on Wednesday afternoon. But that is the time when we visit the tomb of Wat Hamid at the Doum tree, answered the man. When we take our women and children and make offerings. We do this every week. The official laughed. Then change the day, he replied. Had the official told these men at that moment that every one of them was a bastard, that would not have angered them more than this remark of his. They rose up as one man, bore down upon him, and would certainly have killed him if I had not intervened, and snatched him from their clutches. I then put him on a donkey and told him to make good his escape. The speech is still for the grandfather, the narrator. We content ourselves with the thought that we visit the tomb of Hamid with our women and children, and that we make offerings there every Wednesday as our fathers and fathers' fathers did before us. Excuse me, my son, while I perform the sunset prayer, it is said that the sunset prayer is strange. So as you listen, the grandfather here is orally transmitted a habit, a tradition that they have inherited from their ancestors. That visitation to Wat Hamid shrine is something that have taken place among them as a tradition. They never ever halt nor abandon. The new national government replaced the imperialist one, as the narrator described it. The short story writer criticized from early beginning of its rule, its palaces, which went through the marginalized palaces towards the peripheral areas, and to quote him in this concern, 2 years passed without our knowing what form the government had taken, black or white. It is emissaries passed through our village without staying in it, while we thank God that He had saved us the trouble of putting them up. So things went on till 4 years ago, a new government came into power. Although this new authority wished to make us conscious of its presence, we awoke one day to find an official with an enormous hat and a small head, in the company of 2 soldiers, measuring up and doing calculations at the Doum tree. We asked them what it was about, to which they replied that the government wished to build a stopping place for the steamer under the Doum tree. But we have already given you our answer about that, we told them. What makes you think we will accept it now? The government which he gave in to you was a weak one, they said, but the position has now changed. So as you listen, the audience, here we have a dialogue that has taken place near Doum tree, near the shrine of Wat Hamid. From government side, represented by an agent employee with 2 soldiers and some other villagers. So the dialogue continued between them, to the point that the people of the village threw the government official and his 2 soldiers in the water and go about their business. More soldiers come and look up 20 of the men of the village. It It wasn't more than a week later when a group of soldiers came along, commanded by the small-headed official with the large hat, shouting, "Arrest that man, and that one, and that one," until they had taken off 20 of us, I among them. The narrator narrated the story. We spent a month in prison. Then one day, the very soldiers who had put us there opened the prison gates. We asked them what it was all about, but no one said anything. Inside the prison, we found a great gathering of people. No sooner had we been spotted than there were shouts and cheering, and we were impressed by some cleanly dressed people, heavily scented, and with gold watches gleaming on their wrists. They carried us off in a great procession back to our own people. There we found an unbelievable immense gathering of people, carts, horses, and camels. We said to each other, "The din and flurry of the capital has caught up with us." They made us 20 men stand in a row, and the people passed along it, shaking us by the hand. The Prime Minister, the President of the Parliament, the President of the Senate, the member for such and such constituency, the members for such and such other constituency. We look at each other without understanding a thing of what was going on around us, except that our arms were aching with all the handshakes we had been receiving from those presidents and members of parliament. Then they took us off in a great mass to the place where the Doum tree and the Doum stand. The Prime Minister laid the foundation stone for the monument you have seen, and for the Doum you have seen, and for the railing you have seen. The narrator, the grandfather, still narrates the rest of the story like a tornado, blowing up for a while and then passing over, so that my tea host disappeared as suddenly as it had come without spending a night in the village. No doubt because of the horse flies, which that particular year were as large and fat and passed, and were as much as during the year the preacher came to us. One of those strangers who were occasionally cast upon us in the village later told us the story of all this fuss and bother. The people, he said, hadn't been happy about this government since it had come to power, for they knew that it had got there by bribing a number of the members of parliament. They therefore bided their time and waited for the right opportunities to present themselves, with the opposition look around for something to spark off things off. When the Doum tree incident occurred and they marched you all off and slung you into prison, the newspapers took this up, and the leader of the government, which had resigned, made a fiery speech in parliament in which he said, "To such a tyranny has this government come that it has begun to interfere in the beliefs of the people, in those holy things held most sacred by them, then, taking a most imposing stance and in a voice choked with emotion, he said, ask our worthy Prime Minister about the Doum tree of Hamid. Ask him how it was that he permitted himself to send his troops and henchmen to desecrate that pure and holy place." The people took up the cry, and throughout the country their hearts responded to the incident of the Doum tree as to nothing before. Perhaps the reason is that in every village in this country there is some monument like the Doum tree of Hamid, which people see in their dreams. After a month of fuss and shouting and inflamed feelings, 50 members of the government were forced to withdraw their support. Their constituencies having warned them that unless they did something, they would wash their hands of them. And so the government fell. The first government returned to power, and the leading paper in the country wrote, "The Doum tree of Hamid has become the symbol of the nation's awakening. Since that day, we have been unaware of the existence of the new government, and not one of those great giants of men who visited us has put in an appearance. We thank God that He has spared us. They have spared us. They have spared us the trouble of having to shake them by hand." So the audience, no doubt, Tayyip Saleh here is attacking the sort of government that only seeking the masses' voice at the time of need. Masses' voice and vote. And throughout history, throughout the successive governments of the country, unfortunately, the same policy is still practiced on the masses and people. Then, طيب صالح concluded Doum tree of what Hamid with the message of accepting change. But change is conditional on certain terms. He says that the spaces are vast enough to accommodate everyone. The shrine, the Doum tree, the agriculture project, the ferry landing, and the water pump. There will be no need to cut down the dome. What all these people missed is that the place accommodates all these things. It accommodates the dome, the shrine, the water pump, and the steamer station, meaning that if people's minds and hearts were broad enough, change would be accepted and development would benefit the village. However, the condition set by the old sheikh was that the agricultural project could not be seen and the ferry could not pass and dock in the village except after the people sleep and no one dreams of what Hamid. No one needs what Hamid treatment and no one finds within himself a desire to visit the shrine or offer visits. Only at this moment can the shrine be removed and the agricultural project established. Young men with foreign spirits in the village suggesting that change will come with the new generation open to the outside world. Or in other words, when a generation that was attached with all its senses to what Hamid and his miracles passes away, and a generation arises that does not believe in him and considers him a myth from the myths of the ancestors that have long exhausted and burdened the descendants. So, as if the writer would like to tell that people will never forget their identity, will never forget what is sacred for them, will never forget their beliefs and what is sacred for them, their identity, their culture. And the ending of the story leaves room for interpretation. It can be understood in several ways. Emphasis on the power of tradition. The ending shows the depths of rooted popular beliefs and the difficulty of uprooting them easily. Possibility of reconciliation, another point. The elder hints at the possibility of a coexistence between the past and the present and between heritage and modernization, instead of the complete exclusion of one by the other. Gradual change. The elders' answer suggests that real change may come slowly and through the new generations who carry difficult or different ideas. Critique of hasty modernization. The ending can be seen as the critique of hasty attempts to impose modernization without considering local values and beliefs. At the end of this episode, I would like to point out the sources that I have consulted. The Impact of Sufism on Arts in Sudan, published book by Abdul Abdullah Saleh, مصورات for publication 2024 Cairo. Amal Muhammad Said Bayumi, a survey of protagonist archetypes and their symbolic significance within the Sudanese village setting of Tayyib Saleh, published paper July 2025. The Doum Tree of What Hamid by Tayyib Saleh at the website islamiclet.wiki.com. The original book, The Doum Tree of What Hamid. By this, the audience, I come to the end of the episode. Seeing you in our third encounter with Tayyib Saleh, The Doum Tree of What Hamid. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.